the full story of how James Bulger's killers, Robert Thompson and John Venables, led their 2-year-old victim past dozens of witnesses on a grim path to his chilling death. To those who aren't familiar with the scene, it looks harmless enough. 2 boys leading a toddler, one holding his hand as they make their way through a normal shopping mall in Bootle, England, near Liverpool. The older boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, seemed like they could be older brothers of the toddler, as some bystanders thought. But they weren't. Instead, they were the toddler's abductors and soon to be his killers. Within hours of that surveillance image being captured on the afternoon of February 12, 1993, 10-year-olds John Venables and Robert Thompson had tortured the 2-year-old James Bulger to death. And in the time between when the image was captured and when James Bulger was killed in a railway embankment a few miles away, the 3 boys had been seen walking around by dozens of people. Many of these witnesses later admitted that James Bulger looked like he was distressed. Some even saw the older boys punch and kick the 2-year-old, but most did nothing. And those that stopped and questioned the James Bulger killers soon enough let them go on their way to ultimately murder the toddler. First, of course, John Venables and Robert Thompson had to snatch Bulger away from his mother in the midst of a busy shopping mall. The boys ended up at the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle, Liverpool. At some point, James Bulger's killers wandered from shop to shop, stealing anything they could get their hands on, then tossing it down the escalators, just for the fun of it. At some point, for some reason still unclear, more than two decades later, Venables and Thompson decided to steal someone's child, who suggested, it is unclear later after they were arrested, each blamed each other. James Bulger was not the first child that the pair had tried to abduct. In fact, the first child nearly became the victim. Soon after the aborted abduction, Venables and Thompson were loitering around the snack kiosk, hoping to steal candy, when they noticed James Bulger by the door of the nearby butcher's shop. When Bulger's mother, Denise, momentarily distracted, they got the toddler to come with them. Venables took him by the hand. Several shoppers later remembered noticing the trio as they walked through the mall. Sometimes Bulger ran ahead, leaving Venables and Thompson to beckon him back with calls of, "Come on, baby." They were caught by surveillance camera leaving the mall at 3:42 p.m. By this time, Denise was panicking. She had thought her son was by her side as she was placing her order at the butcher shop. But when she looked down, he was gone. She quickly found a mall security personnel and described her son and what he was wearing. At first, they announced the boy's name over the loudspeakers. By 4:15 p.m., however, there was no sign of James Bulger, and he was reported to be missing to the police. Meanwhile, after Venables and Thompson and Bulger had left the mall, the toddler began crying out for his mother. The older boys ignored him and continued to a secluded area down a canal. After they beat him and left 42 puncture wounds on his face and 14 skull fractures, they left his body on the railway to be cut in half by a train. Then they arrived at the railway. The boys hesitated, perhaps reconsidering what they were about to do, and did briefly turn away from the embankment. But then John Venables and Robert Thompson turned back towards the privacy of the deserted railway. The brutal torture and the murder of James Bulger occurred sometime between 5:45 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Venables and Thompson had brought blue paint to splash in Bulger's left eye. Then they kicked him, pummeled him with bricks and stones, and they stuffed batteries into his mouth. Finally, the boys hit Bulger over the head with a 22-pound iron bar, which resulted in 14 skull fractures. All in all, Bulger sustained 42 injuries to his face, 14 to the head and body. He was so badly battered, authorities later concluded that there was no way to tell which injury represented the fatal blow. Eventually, Venables and Thompson placed Bulger's dead body across the train tracks in hopes of making the whole thing look like an accident, and abandoned the scene before the train came along and severed the toddler in two. The next day, police searched the canal where the boys had been earlier in the afternoon because eyewitnesses had reported seeing Bulger there. Other searches were conducted elsewhere, all leading to nothing. With little to go on, Bulger's parents were suspects initially, but when the police eventually saw the CCTV footage from the shopping mall, they could not believe their eyes. Despite footy footage, it was two small boys that could be seen leading James Bulger to the exit. The search ended 2 days after the disappearance, when 4 children discovered Bulger's body on the railway track, just 200 yards away from the police station. Thompson, later released 8 years after the killing, returned normal to society. Venables, however, was not so lucky. He was charged with child pornography offenses and sentenced to prison until 2013. Then Bulger's father said he wasn't surprised on national TV. And Venables then again was charged with child pornography, and it was blasted all over the internet and news. And although no one is allowed to have pictures of them currently because it is illegal, because they were given new names when they left prison. Despite this, people always looking for them in small neighborhoods playing with other children, but have been unable to identify him. This sad case was ultimately an anonymous call to the police that impacted John Venables and Robert Thompson as the James Bulger killers. The caller told police that the Venables and Thompson were both absent from school on Friday, and that they themselves had seen blue paint on the sleeve of Venables' jacket. They would be the first killers at the age of 10 in 250 years. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.